My name is Donna. I'm 32 years old, living in Portland, and I own a small residential HVAC maintenance company. The job isn't glamorous, no high-riser office or designer suits, but it's something I built from the ground up after nearly a decade of tireless work. I'm proud of it, even if not everyone in my family feels the same. It happened this Thanksgiving, a day that should have been whole, but instead became the moment I realized my true place in the hearts of those I thought were closest. I had just finished a long maintenance job, leaving the client's house as the sky turned dusky. Driving home, I felt at ease. The business was closed for the holiday, all my employees had received their bonuses, and I had picked up a bottle of red wine from a high-end shop to bring to the family dinner. Ever since my dad passed away, every Thanksgiving my mom cooked a big feast, and everyone showed up. I had never missed a single year. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. "Ellen," I answered, still smiling. "Hi, Mom. I'm on my way home. Do you want me to bring apple pie or mashed potatoes this year?" There was a strangely long silence on the other end. Then she spoke, her voice a little shaky. "Donna, there's something I want to tell you, and I hope you'll understand." I frowned. "What is it, Mom?" "I think maybe this year you shouldn't come to Thanksgiving." My foot nearly slipped off the gas pedal. "What?" "It's just that Mason, Brittany's boyfriend, is bringing his parents over. They work in law, very traditional types. Brittany wants everything to feel a bit more formal." I gripped the steering wheel tighter, my heart pounding. "You mean I'm not allowed to come? I'm not family?" "That's not what I mean, Donna. Of course you're family. It's just that Brittany feels you might give the wrong impression. What I mean is, because I'm an HVAC tech? Because I didn't go to an Ivy League school?" I cut her off, my voice already trembling. "Donna, don't make this more difficult." She sighed, her voice softening in that way I'd grown too familiar with. The tone she used when she was about to say something unforgivable, but still expected me to swallow it without complaint. I swallowed the bitterness rising in my throat. "Do you remember who paid Brittany's tuition? I paid for all 4 years while she was in school in New York. Never missed a deadline. I gave her a future I never had." Mom went silent. Then she said weakly, "It's just one evening, Donna. We can see each other another time. Maybe a brunch." I hung up. I didn't cry. I just sat in my car, hands still on the wheel, feeling hollow, as if someone had torn out a part of me I didn't even know I'd been holding on to. An hour later, while I was sitting quietly in my apartment, a text from my cousin Madison popped up. "I thought you should know. Brittany told her mom you embarrass her. She doesn't want her boyfriend's family knowing someone in her house works with their hands." I read that line over and over. My grip on the phone was so tight, my fingertips left marks on the screen. Brittany, the same sister who once called me her hero when I gave her her first laptop at 18, the same girl I walked 3 snowy blocks for just to get rent money to her on time. Now, she was ashamed of me. And I knew, tonight, when everyone was sitting around the dinner table, toasting, laughing, no one would mention me. No one would save me a seat. No one would notice I wasn't there. Because in their eyes, I never really was. I still remember the next morning. The early winter sun slipped through the kitchen window like nothing had happened. I sat alone with a cold cup of coffee, the phone lying silently on the wooden table. I should have been prepping a pie, picking out a dress, getting ready to laugh with my family like every other year. But this year, all I felt was empty. I scrolled through social media without thinking. Then, like a punch to the gut, I saw the photo. Posted by none other than Brittany. She stood in the center of Mom's living room, wearing a bright red dress, hand in hand with Mason. The dining table behind them was perfectly set. Fresh flowers, lit candles, everything flawless. The caption read, "A warm Thanksgiving with the ones who matter most." I wasn't in the picture. Not a word about me, not a question about where I was. Just as I put my coffee down, my phone buzzed again. It was Madison. My cousin, the only one in the family who still called me for reasons other than favors. "You okay?" Her first message. I hadn't replied yet when the next one came. "I think you need to hear this, even if it hurts. Brittany told everyone you shouldn't come because she doesn't want her boyfriend's family to know she comes from a working-class background. She said, if Donna shows up, they'll think we live in a garage." I froze. I read it over and over, hoping I'd misunderstood or that Madison was joking in some cruel way. But I knew Madison wasn't like that. And deep down, I knew it sounded exactly like something Brittany would say. This wasn't the first time she had acted distant about my work. I once visited her dorm in sophomore year, wearing my dusty work uniform after finishing a job nearby, and she quickly pulled me into a corner, whispering, "Can you change shirts? Everyone here's in law school, it just looks weird." I let it go. I always let it go. I thought she was just young and embarrassed. I thought she'd grow out of it and realize a person's worth isn't measured by the starch in their collar. But I was wrong. I'd been wrong from the start. I had paid Brittany's Columbia tuition since the moment she stepped onto campus. Each semester cost over $18,000. I worked overtime, skipped vacations, turned down personal days, just to make sure she never had to worry about tuition, books, or housing. I never asked for a thank you. I didn't need Christmas cards. I just thought if I helped her build a good life, at the very least, I'd be welcome at the family table. But in Brittany's eyes, I wasn't someone to be introduced. I wasn't someone who mattered. I closed my phone, heart pounding. Anger, shame, heartbreak, disappointment, all swirled inside me like a storm with no way out. I stepped outside, watching the cars pass under a gray sky, and I understood. What hurt wasn't that I wasn't invited. It was being erased by someone I loved with everything I had. In that strange, quiet moment, I knew I couldn't go on like this. I couldn't keep living as the one who was always dismissed. I couldn't be the only one holding on to bonds that were one-sided. I went back inside, sat at my desk, and opened the folder labeled Brittany's Tuition Private. The line read, "Next payment due in 14 days, $18,740. I moved my cursor to remove payment method. A warning popped up. "Are you sure you want to remove your payment method? This action cannot be undone." I didn't hesitate. I clicked confirm. A soft click echoed as I closed the laptop, but inside me, it sounded like the latch of a door finally shutting. For good. The next morning, when the clock struck 7 a.m., I was already seated at my desk, a steaming cup of tea next to my laptop, which was open to the Columbia University login page. I entered my email and password. As always, the message, "Welcome back, Donna C.," popped up. The tuition payment section was clearly displayed. Spring term balance due, $18,740. Payment due, 14 days. I had stared at that message countless times, and every time I'd sigh, grab my wallet, and pay it right away. But this time, my fingers weren't shaky or hesitant. I moved the cursor to the button labeled Remove Payment Method. A small pop-up appeared. "Are you sure you want to remove your account information? This action cannot be undone." I stared at the screen for a few seconds, then clicked confirm. A small ping sounded, and just like that, it was over. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone started vibrating. The first call was from Mom. Before I could pick up, another call came in, this time from Brittany. Both went straight to voicemail. I knew they wouldn't stop. I switched my phone to silent and got back to work. By noon, I was checking the HVAC system at Quinn and Harris law offices when my phone lit up non-stop. A quick glance, 8 missed calls, 14 unread texts. I knew I should have ignored them. But then, one message from Brittany made me pause. "What did you just do? The school said my tuition's unpaid. Your account disappeared. Call me back now." Right after that came a message from Mom. "Donna, You can't be this cruel to your sister. You know she has no one else but you." I stood frozen in the client's reception room, the clipboard in my hand suddenly cold. A chill ran down my spine, not from the A/C, but from the realization that, in Mom's eyes, I was just the only option to keep her daughter from failing. Not her daughter. Not someone who'd worked her hands raw for 10 years. Just a walking wallet. That afternoon, as I drove home, Mom's 13th call came through. I sighed and answered. Her voice immediately burst through, tense. "Donna, you can't just walk away like this. Do you know how panicked Brittany is right now?" I kept my hands steady on the wheel, voice calm. "I know, and I think she should be panicking." "Don't you think this is too harsh?" Mom continued, voice cracking with anger. "She's in her final year. What if she gets kicked out?" I let out a short laugh. "Mom, Brittany's old enough to understand the consequences of her actions. She's an adult, not a child I need to carry. You promised you'd help her until she graduated." I paused for a second. "I promised to help my sister. But the Brittany you're defending today, that's not someone who sees me as family. I'm not obligated to keep enabling ingratitude." Mom went silent. Then, as always, she softened her tone, layering it with guilt. "You're the only one in this family who can help. Are you really going to abandon your family?" I bit my lip, eyes fixed on the road ahead. Family isn't made up of people who only call when they need a withdrawal. Family doesn't shut you out of dinner just because your job isn't refined enough. I'm not an endless ATM, Mom. A long sigh. Then her usual closing line. "You've changed." I smiled bitterly. "No, Mom. I've just finally started living as myself." I ended the call. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the white ceiling, letting the silence wrap around me. No more ringing phone, no desperate texts, no guilt trips. Then, a soft ding. A new message. "Donna, I can't believe you'd do this to me. I've lost everything. Hope you're happy with your decision." I stared at the message for a long time. Didn't respond. Because if Brittany truly believed I'd destroyed her life with a single click, then maybe she never realized it was she who started destroying everything in the first place. I don't know what happened after Brittany's last message, because for the next 3 days, my phone stayed completely silent. No calls from Mom, no texts from distant relatives. Everything was quiet. And a year ago, I might have cried from the emptiness, but now, the silence felt like a rare gift. No expectations, no blame, no more playing the role of the selfless sister. I was reviewing technical documents at the office when Madison called. "Have you heard?" Her voice came through, hushed and urgent. "Heard what?" I asked, though my gut already knew. "Brittany. She showed up at Jordan's house this morning." I frowned. "Jordan? Brittany's boyfriend?" "No, ex-boyfriend now," Madison said, her tone low and deliberate. I sat upright. "What do you mean?" Madison took a deep breath. "Mason broke up with her. He moved out of the apartment this morning. Someone saw Brittany crying in Jordan's yard for nearly an hour." I stayed silent. For the first time in weeks, I was genuinely shocked. "You know why?" Madison continued. "Mason told his mom that Brittany lied about who paid her tuition. He thought her parents were covering all of Columbia's costs. When he found out it was you, her sister, he was speechless." A chill ran down my spine. Not from joy, not from vindication, but from the realization that Brittany hadn't just erased me from her life. She had replaced me with a version of reality where I didn't exist, just to fit into a world she thought she deserved more. "How long did she lie to Mason?" I asked. "Almost 2 years," Madison said hesitantly. Mason said he felt like he'd been pulled into a long play where the lead character was never real. That afternoon, I received an email from Columbia's student office. "Please note, the primary payment method has been removed from Brittany Calloway's student account. Her financial status is currently unresolved. Please update a valid payment method by January 10 to avoid withdrawal from the university. I didn't forward it. Didn't call Mom. Didn't inform Brittany. I just skimmed the message and closed my screen. But sure enough, Brittany reached out to Mason. They met that evening at a familiar cafe in the Belmont district. I wasn't there, but Madison knew someone who worked at the place, and word spread like wildfire. Mason was already there when she showed up, 15 minutes late, Madison recounted, her voice a mix of pity and unease. She wore a silk dress, full makeup, like she was trying to salvage the last image of perfection. And? I asked. Mason didn't let her say much. He asked her straight up, "Why didn't you tell me the truth about Donna?" I pictured the scene. Brittany's face going stiff, her hands twisting together under the table. She told him she was embarrassed, that she didn't want him to think she was taking advantage, that her family situation was complicated and she just wanted to keep up a good image in front of Mason's parents. I wasn't surprised. That was the kind of language Brittany always used, subtle, evasive, shifting blame while still sounding innocent. But Mason didn't buy it, Madison continued. He told her, "If you're mature enough to build a future for yourself, you should be mature enough to be grateful to the one who gave you that opportunity." I stayed silent. My heart ached, though I couldn't tell if it was for Brittany or because, for the first time, someone outside the family said what I never dared to ask for. Mason added one more thing, Madison finished. I can't love someone who's ashamed of their own family. Because if today it's your sister, tomorrow, it might be me. I leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes. Brittany had lost her tuition. Now she had lost her relationship, and the saddest part was, she still didn't understand why everything was falling apart. 3 days after that last call with Madison, I received a second email from Columbia. "This is your final notice. If tuition is not paid by the January 10 deadline, student Brittany Calloway will be automatically withdrawn from the spring semester enrollment. Please address this immediately to avoid disruption to academic progress." I read that line 3 times, but felt nothing. Not anymore. I had given Brittany more chances than anyone ever had, and all she did was turn me into something to be hidden, behind silk curtains. That night, Brittany called 6 times in a row. I didn't pick up. Her messages poured in. I know I messed up. I was just scared of being judged. "You can't do this to me. I'll lose everything. Do you not love me anymore? Were all those years just fake? If I get kicked out, my future is over, Dottie." I didn't reply. After the 10th call, I blocked her number. 2 days later, she used a different number to call again. When I blocked that too, the messages moved to email, Instagram, even LinkedIn. The last one read, "If you don't answer, I'll come find you." And sure enough, Brittany did the one thing no one thought she would ever dare to do. On Monday morning, while I was in a meeting with my tech team about a new HVAC contract for a coastal hotel chain, the glass door to the office flew open so hard the security chime went off. I looked up. Brittany stood in the doorway, hair messy, mascara streaked from crying, her heels caked in mud. "I need to talk to my sister," she shouted, freezing everyone in the room. I stood up, my gaze cold as steel. "This is a place of business, Brittany. You don't get to cause a scene here." "You're ruining my life," Brittany shrieked, her voice full of desperation. "You can't just cut me off like nothing happened." Before I could respond, security was already moving toward her, firm-voiced. "Ma'am, we need you to leave the building. Now." "Don't touch me," Brittany snapped, her eyes wild. "I'm the sister of the woman who runs this place." I stepped forward, calm and steady. "You're the sister of the person who runs this place, not the one running it. You don't have the right to disrupt my work because you refuse to face the consequences of your own actions. You're abandoning me," she yelled one last time. But no one reacted. No sympathetic glances, no nods of agreement. Just the cold silence and her heavy footsteps as security escorted her out. That afternoon, my phone buzzed again. "Mom?" I hesitated, then answered. "Donna, what happened this morning?" Brittany called me, said she was kicked out of your office. She's humiliated. I said nothing, sipping my water slowly. Do you know what it'll mean if she gets expelled? Mom went on, her voice breaking. I know, I answered firmly. And I think she needs to learn how to take responsibility. Families don't turn their backs on each other like this, she snapped. You're her sister. I set my glass down, my voice steady. I was her sister. But to her, I've only ever been a tool. When I stopped paying, I stopped being family. Donna, I'm begging you. I cut her off. I didn't work myself to the bone for 10 years just to be labeled a shame. I took a deep breath. You should call the bank. Or learn to say no, like I did. I hung up. The next day, Aunt Carol called. Then Uncle Jeff. Even a high school friend I hadn't spoken to in nearly a decade messaged me. Donna, is it true your sister might get expelled? People are saying you went too far. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in my life, I was certain of one thing. I was no longer a walking wallet. And I had learned that love cannot exist where there is exploitation. Not anymore. In the weeks following the office incident, I expected to be dragged into a never-ending battle with my family, and it came just as I'd predicted. Late-night calls, relentless texts, all wrapped in those two words. Blood ties. You're too cold. She's still your sister. Donna, people are saying you've changed. You don't care about family anymore. Words that in the past might have brought me to tears. But now I simply put the phone down on my desk, looked out the window at the pine trees swaying in the late-year wind, and let myself be quiet. No more defending, no more apologizing. I didn't need to explain myself anymore. One morning in mid-December, as I was reviewing ventilation plans for a new shopping center project, Madison texted. Just saw your mom at the grocery store. She said Brittany dropped out and moved back home. Honestly, they both looked rough. I stopped typing. My eyes lingered on the message. She also said, she still thinks it's your fault. I wasn't surprised. To my mom, accountability was always something that could be reassigned, and I was usually the one it got assigned to. Brittany failing because she couldn't face reality? Irrelevant. What mattered was that I dared to walk away. But instead of feeling sad, I felt relief. Because while they were still stuck in that loop of blame and denial, I was starting a new chapter in my life. With the money I used to spend on Brittany's tuition, I expanded my company, hired 2 certified technicians, upgraded to new carbon monoxide testing equipment, and even redesigned the office in a modern, neutral-toned palette. I also accepted a 3-year maintenance contract with a chain of coffee shops in the Pearl District. 6 figures. Now I work not out of fear of lacking, but because I truly love what I do. No one makes me feel less than for not wearing a corporate name badge. No one asks, so, when are you switching to a real job? No one sighs when I say I run my own technical crew. And most importantly, no one treats me like I'm invisible. On Christmas Eve, I sat alone on the couch, my moss green sweater wrapped around a tired body after a long day. Outside the window, neighbors' lights blinked in and out, and the sound of church bells echoed faintly in the distance. I poured myself a glass of white wine, planning to watch a feel-good comedy before bed. Then my phone lit up. It was a message from Mom. Donna, Christmas just isn't the same without you. Everyone misses you. Call me. I don't know how long I stared at that message. Maybe just a few seconds? Or maybe it was a whole lifetime folded into a single moment. I thought of all the Christmases past. I was always the one who brought the little tree, who wrapped everyone's gifts, who paid for dinner with money I could have spent caring for myself. But no matter what I did, I was always not presentable enough around company. I took a deep breath and gently deleted the message. Not because I didn't miss them, not because I never loved my family, but because, for the first time, I had learned to love myself more than people who never truly valued me. I don't expect Brittany to change. I don't expect my mother to apologize. I only hope that, from now on, I can live a life where I don't need permission just to exist. A few weeks after Christmas, as Portland welcomed the first cold, damp rains of the new year, I received a handwritten letter from someone I least expected, my grandmother, Evelyn Calloway. She hadn't lived with our family in years. After Grandpa passed, she moved to a small house in the suburbs of Salem, nearly a 3-hour drive away. I only visited her a few times a year during the holidays. But she had always been the one person in the family who never judged me for my career or lifestyle. All she ever asked was that I show up, with a smile, and the same calloused hands that built everything I had. The letter was written neatly, her handwriting slanted like the gentle tone of her voice. My dear Donna, I don't know exactly what's happened in the family lately, but I know this. When a woman like you finds the courage to set boundaries, many people will feel uncomfortable. Don't let that stop you. Who among them has ever sacrificed for you the way you have for them? I am proud of you. Not because of the money you make or the contracts you sign, but because you have learned to protect your own heart. I read that letter 3 times. Amid all the blame and guilt, she was the only one who saw me, fully, without needing an explanation. And I realized, maybe she was the first person who made me believe that choosing myself isn't a betrayal. I used to believe that family was unbreakable. That if I gave enough, they'd eventually love me, accept me, be proud of me. But I was wrong. Because no one is obligated to love you if all they've ever learned is how to take. And you are not obligated to sacrifice yourself just because someone shares your last name. I spent too many years living as though my worth was measured by how much I could give. Every tuition payment, every expensive birthday gift, every vacation I canceled to work more hours, I used to think those were acts of love. But the truth is, love doesn't ask you to hide who you are. Love doesn't make you feel ashamed of the job that feeds you. It doesn't require you to step back just so someone else can shine. If someone expects you to do that, it's not love, it's control. Dressed up as family. I no longer feel guilty for staying silent when mom texts. I no longer feel torn when relatives call me stubborn or cold. And I don't dream of Brittany showing up at my door with tears in her eyes hugging me, saying she was wrong. I don't need that anymore. I've learned how to hold myself, to stand firm in the storm of opinions, and to say, clearly, I wasn't born to be a backdrop in someone else's story. If you're in a situation like mine, where you give and all you get back is silence, judgment, or indifference, here's what I want you to remember. Setting boundaries is not selfish. It's an act of courage. Choosing dignity over dysfunction doesn't make you a bad person. In fact, it means you've grown. It means you finally know your worth. I don't know if Brittany will ever learn that lesson. I don't know if my mother will ever stop running from accountability. But I do know this. I will never go back to who I used to be. The one who quietly paid the bills but never got a seat at the table. The one who always did everything right but was still treated like a shame. And finally, I chose myself. Not to get revenge, but to finally live. Donna's story is a powerful reminder that family cannot survive without respect and recognition. In a world where people often judge by appearance or status, she found the strength to draw the line and choose herself. Not out of spite, but from self-worth. She shows us that love doesn't mean blind sacrifice. Saying enough to being used is the first step to reclaiming your value, in living a life that's free, worthy, and empowered. What do you think of Donna's decision? Was she right to set boundaries and put herself first? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to follow the channel for more heartfelt, real, and inspiring stories about family. The birthday party was held in my sister's backyard, a modern farmhouse on the outskirts of Austin, strung with twinkling lights through every tree branch and a long table draped in white lace, decorated like something out of a wedding magazine. My twin nieces, Harper and Lily, had just turned 8. They wore identical, shimmery pink sequin dresses, their hair in fishtail braids with bows as big as their hands. The place was packed, full of familiar faces I hadn't seen in ages. Mostly for good reason. I held my daughter Ellie's hand as we stepped into that crowded garden. She had just turned 7 and had picked out a sparkly blue headband that morning because she said it looked like a smiling star. Ellie was shy, never fully at ease in crowds, and I felt her little shoulders tense as we walked in. But she had practiced saying happy birthday all the way there, and had even made 2 handmade cards with drawings of suns and rainbows. I told myself, just having the courage to show up was already a victory. I spotted my sister Abigail in the center of it all, laughing loudly, a glass of champagne sparkling in her hand. When our eyes met, she gave a slight nod before turning away, like I was a late-arriving housekeeper. My mom gave me that tight-lipped smile she always used to say, "Don't make a scene." My dad didn't even look up from his plate of sandwiches, as if the cold cut in his hand was the most important thing in the world. The gift bag handout happened right after the candle blowing. Each child was called up to receive a glittery fabric tote bag, their names written in sparkly cursive. I caught glimpses of the gifts inside: mini stuffed animals, handmade bracelets, imported lollipops, personalized water bottles with their initials. The delighted squeals sounded like a second Christmas. Then came Ellie's turn. An adult, probably one of my sister's friends, handed her a small, crumpled white paper bag. No decorations, just a crooked yellow sticky note on the front, scribbled in black marker. "Try harder next time." I saw Ellie pause. She looked at the bag like she was trying to misread it, like it had to be a joke, but no friendly laughter followed. She opened the bag slowly, as if still hoping there was something kind inside. A broken pencil, a discolored mint, and a dirty gray eraser. Nothing else. No note, no explanation. She turned to me, her eyes were shining, her hand squeezing mine. I knew that feeling, that gut-level confusion, that sense of having done something wrong without knowing what. I heard Abigail burst out laughing, that sharp-edged laugh she used when she thought she was being funny. "She's been a little extra lately," she said, like telling a joke. Crying, interrupting, too sensitive about little things. This was just a gentle reminder. My mom chuckled along. "Honestly, it's good for her, Nancy. You baby her too much." My dad grunted, like it was all just a dumb play he was being forced to sit through. I looked down at Ellie. She was trying to smile, that twisted kind of smile kids use when they're trying to hold in tears. No one else in that crowd seemed to notice. Or worse, they noticed and still chose to laugh. Jason, my husband, was standing beside me. He didn't say a word, just gently took the bag from Ellie's hands and said, voice low but steady, "Let's go get you a real treat." We took Ellie's hands and walked out of that party, quietly but with purpose, like people leaving a house that was already smoldering. No one stopped us, no one called out, not even Abigail bothered to turn her head. And I understood. This wasn't a party anymore. This was a warning, and a final line. On the drive home, Ellie sat silently in the back seat, hugging the torn white bag like she was still trying to figure out what had just happened. I caught Jason's eyes in the rearview mirror, calm but stormy. No one spoke. Even the car radio had been turned off at some point, leaving space for a strange kind of silence. Not uncomfortable, just like the three of us were all holding our breath, waiting for something to break. When we got home, Ellie didn't run to her room like she usually did. She placed the gift bag on the table, pulled off the sparkly headband, and climbed onto the couch, curling up under the thin Thanksgiving throw Jason had given her last year. She was still holding the 2 crayon-colored cards. The stars she'd drawn looked smudged now, like they were melting into each other. "Was it because I forgot to say thank you?" Ellie asked, her voice barely a breath, eyes still on the card. I felt my heart tighten. I sat beside her, gently touching her hand. "No, Ellie, it wasn't your fault. It wasn't because you forgot anything." I paused to make sure my voice was clear, firm. "Some people forget how to be kind, and that has nothing to do with you." She nodded. "Barely." Then she pulled the card to her chest like it was a paper shield. "But if I had drawn it better, maybe they would have liked it more." I wanted to say something strong. Something that would make it all better? That love isn't something you should have to earn? But I couldn't find the words that felt right. I just pulled her into my arms and held her tight, as if I could block out every careless word that had ever been thrown at her heart. When Ellie drifted off to sleep in my arms, Jason came in with 2 mugs of hot tea. He sat across from me, thoughtful. "This," he said, "wasn't about a paper bag." I nodded. "I know." "How many times has it been now?" he asked, not needing an answer. "The time you brought pie to Thanksgiving and your mom said it was too salty, the time your sister said Ellie dressed weird, the time your dad told her to toughen up instead of crying at loud noises." I sighed. I used to hope they'd change. For Ellie. I thought, if I was patient enough, kind enough, one day they'd see her for who she really is. Jason set his mug down. "But they don't. They don't want to. Because if they see Ellie, they'd have to admit they were wrong about how they treated you." I looked back at my daughter, sleeping soundly, still holding her card like it was a dream she didn't want to let go. "I can't let this happen again." Jason said nothing, but I saw him nod, not in permission, but in silent agreement, like a vow. I stood up and walked to the drawer in my home office, the one where I kept temporary things I once thought I'd deal with someday. The utility bills I'd paid for my parents when they forgot, the texts from my sister asking me to watch the twins so she could take a week off from the stress. The promise to pay me back for the roof repairs after the storm, that still hung in the air. I had printed it all out, neatly organized in a nameless folder. Quietly, I opened the lid, pulled out a blank page and a marker. I wrote, slowly, deliberately. Not to threaten or punish, but to record the truth. In the top right corner, I taped the wrinkled yellow sticky note, the one from Ellie's gift bag. The words, "Try harder next time," still visible, still tilted like a smirk. Jason walked in and saw me placing it on the first page of the folder. He said nothing. Then he rested a hand on my shoulder. "This time, we're not going back, okay?" I squeezed his hand. "No more times." That night, I didn't sleep. I sat beside Ellie's bed, listening to her steady breaths. In the dark, I thought of all the times I'd stayed quiet. All the times I was told I was too sensitive, too demanding, overreacting. And I swallowed it, afraid of making things worse. But this wasn't about me anymore. This was about Ellie. And Ellie deserved a different beginning. Tomorrow, I'd start clearing things out, both the house and my heart. But tonight, I just sat there, keeping watch over her peaceful sleep, and whispered a promise. No one will hurt her again, not as long as I still have breath in my chest. I grew up in a 4-bedroom house with 3 witnesses to the fact that I was always the one left out. My sister, Abigail, was the kind of child parents build their hopes on and repeat like a tired refrain. Straight-A student, hair always neat, knew how to talk to adults, and never made a fuss. Every word, every move she made was met with warm smiles and gentle pats on the back. And me, the child who asked too many whys, got distracted easily, and never quite learned how to please a crowd, was often left out of the frame. I remember back in 3rd grade when my teacher chose me as the inspiration of the month for helping a classmate learn to read. I ran home with the certificate, still smelling of fresh ink. My mom picked it up, glanced at it, and said, "Your sister was chosen 3 months in a row, but congratulations." Then she turned back to finish her favorite TV drama. There was no cake, no text in the family group chat like the ones that always showed up whenever Abigail won a school debate competition. When I started drawing, though I wasn't very good, I really loved it, my dad said, "You should do something more practical, like your sister studying finance. Art doesn't put food on the table." My sketches slowly ended up in my desk drawer, collecting dust, and eventually, even I forgot about them. I used to think I was just too sensitive. I blamed myself for feeling left out, for feeling compared. I tried to do everything right, kept my room clean, finished homework before dinner, never needed to be asked twice, but it was never enough. I was still the one stuck in the front seat whenever we went on family trips, because the better seats were for Abigail. She gets carsick easily. I was still the one who had to give up my favorite food because your sister really enjoys that dish. My feelings were never seen as valid. When I cried after my best friend turned her back on me, my mom said, "What did you do to upset her? Don't overcomplicate things." When I said I felt sad for no reason, she sighed, "Kids these days always think something's wrong just to get attention." No one ever asked why I was sad. They just wanted me to stop so they wouldn't be bothered. I grew up believing that love was something to be earned, that I was only worth caring about when I wasn't a burden, when I did everything right. And if I ever felt hurt, it was my fault for being too sensitive. It wasn't until college, when I finally got out of that thick atmosphere, that I realized not all families are like that. I met Jason my senior year. He was the first person who really listened without interrupting or brushing me off with empty advice. The first time I cried because I missed home, even though I couldn't think of a single thing I missed, he simply rested his hand on my back, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The first time Jason met my family, he stayed quiet through the entire dinner. Then, once we got in the car, he said, "I get it." I didn't have to explain. The way my mom asked all about Abigail's work but forgot to ask what I did. The way my dad bragged to Jason about his successful daughter without ever looking in my direction. He saw everything. And then Ellie came along. Her arrival made me believe I could change things. I wanted her to have what I never did. A full family, holiday gatherings, memories with grandparents, aunts and uncles. I forgave my mom, my dad, Abigail, or at least tried to set aside the hurt so Ellie wouldn't miss out. I ignored the sarcastic comments about my parenting, her outfit choices, the way she didn't like being hugged. I brushed off the times Ellie looked at me with wide eyes and asked, "Mom, why does Grandma shake her head like that when I talk?" I kept telling myself, if I'm patient enough, kind enough, they'll come to accept Ellie, love her, change. Until that day. The gift bag with the yellow note. Ellie's strange smile. Abigail's gleeful laugh. And I realized I was wrong. The pattern didn't start with Ellie. It started with me. And if I did nothing, it wouldn't stop with her. That wasn't just a party. It was a perfect reenactment of what I'd lived through. Only this time, it pierced right through my daughter's heart. I started noticing something wasn't right when Ellie was 4. It began with what seemed like harmless remarks, like when she wore a purple star-print dress to a classmate's birthday. "Not the kind of dress a little girl should wear," my mom said flatly when she saw the photo I posted. Abigail texted with a smirking emoji, "Let's hope she doesn't think fashion is her thing." I laughed it off, typed, "Kids have their own style," and scrolled past it, telling myself I was overreacting. But the small comments started to pile up. I remember once when Ellie didn't want to hug her grandpa during a holiday visit, she pulled her hand back, hiding behind me, quietly saying, "I don't want to be touched." My mom frowned and said loudly in front of everyone, "Kids these days are so rude. Who's going to love her acting like that?" Abigail burst out laughing. "Guess she takes after her mom, so emotional and loves controlling people." I spoke up gently, explained that Ellie had sensitivity to physical touch and needed her boundaries respected. My parents just looked confused and irritated. "You're teaching her to reject basic manners," my dad said, with a tone like it was absolute truth. I tried to explain how Ellie reacts to loud sounds, how she needs time to adjust to new people, that this was part of how she experiences the world. But no one listened. Every time I set a boundary to protect her, I got labeled again. Overprotective, snowplow mom, too intense. One Christmas gathering, Abigail put a loud toy right in front of Ellie, one I'd specifically asked not to bring. Ellie startled, covered her ears, and burst into tears. Instead of apologizing, Abigail stared at me and shrugged. "This is called real-world training. Life doesn't come with a volume control. I held Ellie close, feeling her whole body shake. As I carried her out of the living room, I heard my mother whisper behind me, "She always overreacts to everything." I don't remember how many times I've left that house with Ellie in my arms and my chest tight. But I remember the familiar feeling, just like when I was called complicated, too emotional, uncontrollable. Only now, it was my daughter. I used to think I was strong enough to endure it, wise enough to separate past from present, but I was wrong. The way they treated me is now being replayed with Ellie. Different name, same script. And like me back then, Ellie has started to learn how to shrink herself, stay quiet, wait for the right moment to speak. One afternoon when Ellie was 6, she brought home a watercolor painting, soft spirals and purples and blues blending together. I asked, "What did you paint?" She said, "I painted my feelings, because I don't know how to say them." I froze. I saw myself in that answer, a child who once had to draw emotions because no one gave her permission to speak them. That night, I called Abigail. I tried to stay calm, explained that the teasing was affecting Ellie, that she needed to be treated with respect. The reply I got was a dry laugh. "Ansi, are you serious? If kids can't handle a few comments, how are they going to survive life? Stop projecting your feelings onto your daughter." I hung up. Jason was next to me, eyes still on his laptop, but his voice low and steady. "How many times have they told you you're imagining the problem?" I didn't answer. I was thinking of Ellie. What kind of person she'd become if I kept letting her be pulled into this cycle. I knew the question would come. Is it worth cutting ties? Keeping your child away from her grandparents, her relatives? I used to be afraid that if I did, Ellie would lose part of her family. But now, I see more clearly than ever. Family isn't the people who make her shrink herself to fit their expectations. Family is where she can be herself, without fear of being laughed at or corrected. And if I have to choose between keeping the peace in a toxic family or protecting the wholeness of my daughter's spirit, I won't hesitate. The morning after the birthday party, I got up earlier than usual even though I hadn't slept much at all. The first light crept through the window, streaking across the wooden floor, soft and quiet, as if to remind me today would be different, not because of what was coming, but because of what I was ending. Jason sat in the kitchen with a cup of coffee, his eyes still foggy, but when I set the thick brown folder on the table, he glanced at it and nodded like he'd been waiting for this moment for a long time. "Where do we start?" he asked. I opened the folder, flipping through the pages. Each one was a memory I had once dismissed, tried to forget, or told myself wasn't a big deal. There were screenshots of texts from Abigail asking if I could help pay for her car repairs because my paychecks messed up this month. A quick thank you followed no repayment. An email from my mom last year about their utilities being shut off because of a billing error and asking me to cover, actually the 4th time in 2 years. Even a bill with my name on the internet service at my parents' house, even though I moved out when I was still single. I'd even printed excerpts from old journal entries about family gatherings where Ellie was mocked, where I was scolded just for not toughening her up. I organized them into sections: finances, hurtful words, emotional neglect, repeating patterns of harm. Then I clipped each one, labeled them clearly. Finally, I stuck a yellow sticky note on the cover. No long explanation, just 3 words. "That's enough." Jason printed 3 copies. One stayed with us, one would go to Abigail. The last I planned to send to Aunt Margaret, the only relative who ever opened her heart to me. She once told me, "Some silences are a kind of complicity." I knew she'd understand. That afternoon, I drove to Abigail's neighborhood, a quiet little suburb in Fort Worth, where she moved after I helped cover most of the down payment. I once thought helping her would keep our fragile connection alive. Now I knew I'd only prolonged a wound that never healed. I didn't ring the bell. I simply placed the envelope squarely at her doorstep, then stepped back a few paces. Jason waited in the car. I looked at the house one last time. The porch full of potted plants I once gave her, the SUV I helped put a deposit on sitting in the garage, and saw it all for what it was, a worn-out stage play I'd finally learned how to walk off of. That evening, when I checked my phone, there were 17 missed calls from Abigail. I didn't answer a single one. There was a message from my mom. "What are you doing? Are you trying to ruin everything?" I didn't respond. I just opened my email, attached the scanned PDF of the file, and sent it to every relative in my contact list, all the ones who ever asked why I stopped coming to family events. The subject line was simple: in case you ever wondered why I stopped showing up. The next morning, I got a reply from Uncle Lewis in Kansas. "This is complicated, but you are very brave. I hope Ellie grows up in a fairer world." A cousin in Oregon sent one line: "Proud of you." I wasn't hoping anyone would pick sides. I just needed the truth to be seen. Jason closed every financial support account we'd quietly been covering for my family over the years. Phone bills, insurance payments, college help for Abigail's eldest daughter she once asked us to cover for a few months. All of it ended in one afternoon. No explanations, no apologies. 3 days later, there was a knock at the door. I looked through the peephole. It was my mother. Her eyes were red, but her gaze still held that same look that always made me feel 10 years old again, part pleading, part blaming. I didn't open the door. Jason stood beside me, his hand resting gently on my shoulder. He didn't need to say anything. My mother left a piece of paper in the mailbox. I opened it. It was a card that read, "Thinking of you," on the front. Inside, in her handwriting, "Family is where we forgive each other. Don't let little things destroy blood ties." I quietly took the yellow sticky note from the folder I had prepped the day before and wrote a new line below the words, "That's enough." It's not a little thing when it happens for years. I stuck it onto the card and placed it back in the mailbox to return. That night, for the first time in years, I slept soundly. No dreams, no second guessing, just quiet. And in that quiet, I finally heard something I'd never been allowed to hear as a child. The sound of my own voice, clear and unwavering. Not even 24 hours after I sent the file to the whole family, my phone started buzzing non-stop like a chaotic symphony. The first message was from Abigail. No greeting, just all caps. "What do you think you're doing?" Then came a string of long texts, mixing guilt-tripping denial and subtle threats. "It was just a joke. Why are you trying to make me the villain? You just destroyed this family over one silly gift bag. If you don't stop, I'll get a lawyer." Then came messages from my parents. My dad's was brief, just one line: "That's enough, Nancy." My mom's was longer, more emotional, but missing the one thing I'd been waiting for my entire life: an apology. She sent an email, along with a handwritten letter through the mail, with the subject line, "Let the past rest." I opened the envelope while Ellie was napping on the sofa, curled under a knit blanket, holding her favorite teddy bear. Jason was working in the backyard, and for a moment, the house was so quiet it felt like it was holding its breath with me. My mother's letter was written on cream-colored stationery with floral borders, her handwriting still neat and precise, just like when she used to correct my homework in first grade. But the content was all too familiar. An old tune with slightly new lyrics. "Family is never perfect, but it's the only place to turn when everything else falls apart. You're cutting off the most valuable bond you'll ever have. You can't keep holding on to petty grudges from the past. Think of Ellie. She needs her grandparents, her aunts and uncles, her cousins." The final line closed with a warning disguised as love. "If you don't come back, someday Ellie will blame you for taking her family away." I don't know what I expected when I opened that letter. Maybe an acknowledgement, a brief moment of honesty, a touch of conscience. But all I got was the same echo I'd heard for years, where every wrongdoing was covered in sugar and labeled family. I sat down, pulled a blank sheet of paper and a black marker from the drawer. No long speech. I simply wrote, "I used to miss my family too." I folded it, placed it in the old envelope, and mailed it back. No signature, no explanation. A few days later, I found out Abigail had written a long Facebook post, complaining about a family member who, out of pride, aired private matters online to ruin someone's reputation. The comments were flooded with support, mostly from her close friends. Some even tagged me, saying things like, "You don't choose your family, but you can learn to forgive. Sisters shouldn't turn against each other over a little misunderstanding." I said nothing, but a few hours later, a cousin from Minnesota, someone I hadn't spoken to in years, messaged me privately. "If what you wrote in that file is true, she owes you more than just an apology." I don't know how far this will spread, but I do know one thing for sure. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel wrong for standing up for myself. One late weekend afternoon, while I was arranging flowers in the kitchen, Ellie ran in from the backyard. Hands muddy, hair messy, eyes shining. She shouted, "Me and Zoe built a whole tent out of towels. Want to see?" I nodded and smiled, setting the scissors down. I always want to see what you create. As we walked into the yard, I remembered something my mother once told me after I got a low grade in math as a kid. "Don't let people see where you're weak. They'll use it against you." But now, I've learned something else. When you know where you're vulnerable, you know how to protect yourself. And more importantly, I'm teaching that to Ellie. Every day, with the unconditional love I never received. As summer gave way to the early winds of fall, Ellie began to change in a way I couldn't quite name, but felt deeply. She laughed more, not the kind of laugh that seeks approval, but light, unburdened laughs, like she could finally breathe in a space that belonged to her. She made 2 new friends in her Tuesday afternoon art class, Lena and Joy, 2 girls from the neighborhood who also loved finger painting and traded friendship bracelets every week. I stood quietly at a distance, watching as Joy tied a green yarn bracelet onto Ellie's wrist. Her eyes lit up like she'd just won a medal. No one there told her she was too sensitive or needed to toughen up, and I knew she was growing up in a safer world than the one I knew. We hung paper lanterns all around Ellie's room, warm, soft light that replaced the old nightlight my mother once said would make a child's nerves weak. I let Ellie pick out new bedding, pastel swirls like watercolor, because she said it looked like the sky after it rains. I bought a new bookshelf for the living room, and for the first time in years, I placed a photo of the 3 of us, me, Jason, and Ellie, right in the center. No more pictures of my parents or Abigail, not out of anger, but because I had let go. At night, Ellie and I read books together. Some nights, she reads to me stumbling but full of confidence. Some nights, she asked me hard questions. "Mom, have you ever been scared? Why don't adults say sorry when they're wrong?" I didn't dodge anymore. I told her the truth, even if it was just a nod and a quiet yes. I used to be scared, but not anymore. One Saturday afternoon, while I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my phone rang. The screen showed Abigail. I wasn't planning to answer, but then a text popped up right after. 6 words. Shorter and colder than any long speech. "Are you happy now? You won." I read the message 3 times. Not because I didn't understand, but because I was checking if I felt anything. Did it hurt? Was I angry? Was I satisfied? I felt nothing at all. Because I didn't win. This was never a competition. There was no winner, no loser, there was just me. A mother who finally did what I once wished someone had done for me as a child. Step in, protect, and not look back. I locked the screen. Didn't reply. That evening, Ellie skipped into the kitchen holding a new drawing. She had painted a small house, surrounded by a rainbow garden with 3 stick figures holding hands in front. A long-hand one, a bearded one, and a smiling child. On the roof, she'd written, "Where I get to be myself." I pinned it on the fridge, right next to the weekly meal plan and scribbled work notes. It was an ordinary moment, but to me, It was a miracle. A few weeks later, Ellie was invited to speak at her school's family day, where each student picked one loved one to sit beside them while they read something they'd written. She chose me. Her piece was only 3 sentences long. Home is where I'm trusted and loved. My mom is my home. And that's where I feel safe. I tried not to cry, but the tears still came. Not from pain, but from relief. That night, when Jason took us out for ice cream, Ellie asked, "Mom, if Aunt Abigail texts you again, will you be mad?" I smiled, gently brushing her hair. "No, I won't be mad, but I don't need to reply either. Because sometimes the strongest thing we can do is stay silent and keep living well." Ellie nodded, then whispered, "I want to live well too. Just like you." I turned to Jason and caught his quiet smile. The kind of smile from someone who knows, deep down, that we did the right thing. In the soft calm of the car driving through the night, I realized I didn't need anyone's approval. I didn't need someone to say, "Nancy was right." Because I already had the clearest proof. A child growing up with trust, safety, and unconditional love. That night, after Ellie had fallen asleep, I sat alone in my home office. The soft yellow light from my desk lamp cast a glow on old sticky notes, calendar pages marked with red circles, therapy appointments, parent-teacher meetings, the day of that unforgettable birthday party. Everything was behind us now. Life for me and Ellie had become peaceful, measured in small moments. Her laughter in the kitchen while baking cookies, the soft gurgle of water from the little fish tank Jason had just set up, the warm shimmer of paper lanterns each night. But in the quietest moments like this one, something still crept in. A question, like a silent shadow. Did I do the right thing? I won't deny that cutting ties with my own family was the hardest thing I've ever done. There were nights I lay awake, not out of regret, but out of ache. I wondered, if I had explained more, if I had cried in front of them, if I had pleaded, would they have changed? Should I have reacted more strongly at the party? Called it out in front of everyone? Protected Ellie with a bold public stand? Or was walking away in silence the strongest thing I could have done? I chose not to speak. Not because I was weak, but because I'd been through enough endless arguments. I didn't need to win a small fight when what I wanted was a lifetime of peace for my daughter. Sometimes I think about my mother, about the things she never said, about how she told me, "Don't make things messy," instead of asking, "Are you okay?" I think about my father, always silent, never stepping in, even when his eyes flickered during Abigail's jabs at dinner. He knew, but he chose silence. I don't want Ellie to grow up in a world like that, a world where silence is mistaken for peace and expressing emotions is seen as too much. I once read somewhere, some families aren't meant to be preserved. They're meant to be let go. And when I see Ellie, painting without trembling, making friends without looking down, smiling without checking for approval, I know I wasn't wrong. But that doesn't mean it's been easy. There are still moments of doubt. I still wake from dreams of family dinners where Abigail doesn't mock me. My mother genuinely asks how I am, and my father holds my hand and says, "I'm sorry." Dreams so vivid that for a few seconds after waking, I forget they never happened, and maybe never will. I look out the window, the shadows of trees swaying beneath the soft streetlight. I think of all the mothers out there, holding the same question I've held. Am I doing the right thing by saying enough? By stepping out of the cycle of excuses labeled family? I don't have a perfect answer. I can't choose for you, but I can say this. I was once a child who was overlooked, shaped by other people's expectations, forced to be sweet, quiet, tolerant, and I carried that through my whole childhood. I can't change my past, but I can change Ellie's future. So, if you're reading this, if you've lived something similar, if you're standing at the edge between family tradition and the emotional safety of yourself or your child, I want to ask, if it were your child, Would you do what I did? Would you stay out of fear of being labeled ungrateful? Or would you walk away to plant a new generation that never had to learn how to endure? Would you choose silence? Or would you break the cycle? With a scream, a letter, or simply one step away without looking back? I don't have the perfect answer, but I have Ellie. A child growing up without having to hide her tears, without fear of being called too much, without needing to earn love. And for me, that's enough to know I'm on the right path. What about you? My story isn't just about a party, a gift bag, or a few hurtful words. It's about the courageous journey to end a generational cycle of silence and pain. I chose to walk away from blood ties that no longer nurtured us, to build a home that was truly safe for my daughter. Maybe I didn't win in other people's eyes, but I chose what was right for my heart. Because happiness doesn't come from keeping the whole family together. It comes from protecting what truly matters. The peace of your child. What do you think about my choice in this story? If it were you, what would you do to protect your child? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more real, heartfelt stories about family.